So I'm often asked, what can I do to reduce turnover in my store? And it's a great question because turnover costs retailers money. I mean, there is no doubt that when you hire someone and you put them through training and you spend your time as a store manager getting them trained up and then they turn around and quit, you need to spend your time doing that again. First, you need to find someone else. That's time off the sales floor. Then you need to go through the hiring process, reference checks, etc. It's time consuming, right? Then you bring them into the store, you introduce them to the team, and you are getting them acclimated and trained. And so it costs you money. There's all kinds of numbers out there from $2,000 to $4,000 of what turnover in your store is costing you. So the idea of reducing turnover is an important notion and one that we should take seriously. I have 3 things for you to consider when you think about reducing turnover in your store. You may say to yourself, well, I have no control. If somebody doesn't want to work here, they're not going to work here. And there are reasons why people quit. Let's talk about those first. One of the reasons is you might be a retailer that attracts high school and college students. And of course, they're probably going to leave and go back to school if they're not attending school locally. So that is something that you should consider when you're hiring people. Does it make sense to hire temporary people who are going to leave? Perhaps that means they'll come back. So that means you're going to have a bench strength of part-time people who will come back at Thanksgiving and at Christmas. And so that can be a good thing. But you definitely need to have balance between the people you are hiring who are going to leave and go back to school and having a balanced team of some stay, some go. Otherwise, you're constantly starting over. So we don't have control over all turnover. We do have control over quite a bit of it. I'll call that, what do I own versus what do I influence? All right, so let's talk about 3 key steps to reducing turnover in your store. Number 1, look at the current team you have today and talk to them. What do they like about working in your store? And what do they dislike? If they could change something, what would that be? We often don't want to hear the answers, but yet the insights from people on the team or people who've worked on the team prior. This is important information for you as a store manager so that you can get real honest feedback on what's good, what isn't, and what can you change. Number 2, you need to really look at your leadership style. Oh gosh, isn't that so hard to stop and look in the mirror? But this is really important. What is my leadership style? And am I the leader that others want to follow? Do I provide instruction and direction, or do I bark orders and micromanage? These are only things that you can answer, but it's certainly an important component. And we'll talk more about how not to be a micromanager in future videos. Sometimes we just do it because we want a good outcome. We're not trying to be a jerk. But the reality is the impact to others when we act like micromanagers is the same, regardless of what our motives and our intentions are. And then number 3 is, are there things in your store that you can do to make it easier on your team? Now, you might say to yourself, it's a job. I'm not making it easy. I pay you money, show up. And I understand that. And certainly, as someone who was a store manager for many years, I can feel that and I have empathy for you. But here's the reality. We live in a new world. After COVID, I think retail really changed considerably. And we've got to be empathic towards the people that work for us. If they have young children or kids getting off the school bus, or, how can you understand where each of your team members is coming from and what their needs are, and how can you make small adjustments that make it a little bit easier for that person, that make them realize and understand that you care about them, and that when you care about them, here's what I believe to be true: they are going to in turn give you the best they have. When we just live by the rules of the game, show up for work when you're scheduled, clock in, do your job, clock out, go home. When we demand that, all we really get are their hands. And what do I mean by that? When I say we get their hands, it means we get the work that we ask them to do, the work that we require them to do, that we tell them to do. They'll give us that. But when they feel appreciated, when they feel valued, what else do they give us? They give us their heart. And their heart means they're willing to do anything you need. They're willing to provide an extra shift here or there. They're willing to stay and work overtime. They're willing to even suggest ideas of things that can be done differently, because you've created a culture and an environment where people can thrive. And so I want you to think about these 3 things and really say, could I do better in all 3? Is it 2 of 3? Is it 1 of 3? But I will promise you that if you can address these 3 core issues, you are going to see a reduction in turnover in your store, because you are going to be the retailer in the mall that people want to work for. Now, I do know that there are retailers out there who pay more than you, and there are things outside of your control. So do you remember at the beginning of the video when I said own versus influence? Your corporate partners own how much you can pay and what benefits are offered and if there's time off and the discount, right? But the things that we've talked about today are the things that you own. So you can influence your corporate partners with what you need from them, but you own your own behavior and what happens within the 4 walls of that store. So can't wait to hear how this works for you, and if you start to see some turnover reduction. But in the meantime, if you have questions, leave them below.